اسألوا جند الصليب اسألوا جند التتار هل يئسنا من قتال أو كسرنا من حصار.
Nearly 4 decades after they began invading Muslim lands, in 2 years after the big massacre in Baghdad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the Ummah man to revive the dead hearts with izzah in jihad that lead the way to victory. And among them is Mahmud ibn Mamdud Sayfuddin Qutuz.
After the tears and screams, fields of bones were left buried in silence. The butcher of Baghdad, Hulagu Khan, has left this land. His eye is fixed on Syria. The Sultan of Aleppo and Damascus, al-Nasir Yusuf, has failed to go to Hulagu and the Mongols in submission. Mongol envoys now go to him with a warning: destroy your fortresses and submit to the great Khan in the east, or suffer his wrath. Some in the Sultan's court favor surrender, but the Sultan believes his cities can weather a siege. One commander called Baybars beseeches the Sultan to rally his armies to meet the Mongols in the field. His eyes silvered by a cataract, this hardened warrior from Egypt warns that walls will not avail against the Mongols. The Sultan disregards him, and so Baybars gathers his followers and leaves Syria to its doom. Death arrives in early 1260.
He tried to unite the Ummah. One of his biggest obstacles was our topic today. The Muslims had a defeatist mentality with lack of optimism and lack of ambition and lack of yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Muslims at that point had a defeatist mindset. Their mindset was set on accepting defeat and humility. It was normalized in their minds to start the flames of jihad to defend Islam and Muslims. He needed to inspire them with words and in action. He needed to prep them with izzah.
The Mongols breached the walls of Aleppo within a week. From the high citadel, the defenders are forced to watch the massacre of their people. The garrison holds out for weeks before surrendering. Another fortress in the region also relinquishes the fight, and it is written, "They came down under amnesty, but Hulagu Khan was extremely angry with them and ordered them killed at once, along with their wives and children." Al-Nasir has fled, and Damascus surrenders without resistance. Mongol-appointed administrators promptly establish control over Syrian cities, thereby uprooting the last of the Ayyubid dynasty. Only a decade before, the Islamic Ayyubids had triumphed over the Crusaders in the ongoing war for the Holy Land, capturing and holding for ransom the French king Louis IX. Amidst the glow of victory, the Ayyubids were ousted from Egypt, overthrown by their elite slave soldiers called the Mamluks, who in turn set about fighting amongst each other for power. Baybars, himself a distinguished Mamluk, had fled for his life as his rivals seized control. Now he returns to make peace with his nemesis, the Mamluk Sultan of Egypt, Qutuz.
When many thought it was the judgment day and it's all over, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the Ummah those who remind them of their duties and those who take charge. Among them, as I said, is Sayfuddin Qutuz. He tried to unite the Ummah. But you know, among his biggest obstacles was the lack of izzah and lack of yaqeen in the hearts of the Ummah during his time. He wanted a small, tiny victory so that he can resuscitate optimism into the hearts of the ummah, into the dead hearts of the ummah back then. The army of the enemy back then was referred to like many of the armies today, the undefeatable army. So the Muslims were terrified.
And now envoys arrive in Cairo with a message from Hulagu Khan. From the King of Kings of East and West, the Supreme Khan, let Qutuz know that we are the soldiers of God on earth, that he created us in his anger. Commit your fate to us before the veil is torn, for we will not be touched by tears.
Saif ad-Din Qutuz sends beepers to Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect Gaza. And he sends with him a small portion of his army to trick and drag the enemy into a battle, while the major portion of the army was way back out of sight. That small unit was supposed to drag the enemy into a battle, and the enemy, of course, would be unprepared, thinking it's just a small group of people. And then the remaining Muslim army would come and rush them.
You have heard that we have purified the earth of the disorders which defiled it, and that we have slaughtered most of the inhabitants. It's up to you to flee. What land will offer you refuge? Which road can save you? Your prayers to God against us will not be heeded. Hurry to give us an answer before the flames of war are ignited, and its sparks are cast upon you. He advises Qutuz to warn his people. Say to Egypt, Hulagu has come, with swords unsheathed and sharp. The mightiest of her people will become humble. He will send their children to join the aged in death. Qutuz has the 4 Mongol envoys publicly cut in half. He hangs their heads from Bab Zuela, the southern gate of Cairo, and the army rides out for war.
It ended up that the small unit of Muslims defeated the small unit of the Tatar, and it was the initial victory that changed history by the will of Allah. The small ground victory was desperately needed to uplift and raise the spirit and confidence of the ummah psychologically. That's how important this topic is. That battle blew the defeatist mentality out of the minds of the Muslims, and it led to the more famous battle of Ain Jalut, which was the beginning of the end for the Tatar.
Riding ahead, Baybars has located the Mongol force not far from a spring called Ain Jalut. And as twilight gives way to dawn over the hills of southeastern Galilee, the Mamluk army beholds the Mongols. Although joined by auxiliary troops including Bedouins and Syrians, the core Mamluks are men who are sold as boys, raised in Islam, and relentlessly drilled to be professional warriors, adept in horse archery and melee, often clad in mail and lamellar armor along with their horses. Across the plain, Mongol heavy troops menace in elaborate armor, either native to Mongolia or pillaged along the warpath. Yet the standard Mongol warriors ride light, with little to no armor. They've known horsemanship, archery, and war since infancy. Personal reserve horses grant them inexhaustible mobility on the battlefield. First blood is drawn by the Mongols. Heavy cavalry smashes into the Mamluk line, followed by a terrible burst of arrows. Mamluks fall all around. Qutuz feels the fear in his men. He shouts for them to hold position, to fight for Islam, and to answer with a charge of their own. In the course of battle, an Ayyubid prince serving on the Mongol left deserts with his troops. The Mamluks likely swarm this open edge, and the Mongol horde becomes entrenched in a bloody melee. Warriors in the eye of the storm tear each other apart with swords, axes, and spears. Horse archers exchange kills on the edges, and at length, the Mongols begin to crumble. Some leap from their mounts for a last stand. General Kitbuka is overrun, and his head is taken as a trophy by Qutuz. Baybars hunts the remaining fleeing Mongols and slaughters many in the hills. When the Mamluks find Mongols hiding in a field of reeds, they set the field on fire. Word of the defeat at Ain Jalut echoes across the land. Mongol officials in Syria abandon conquered cities, and the Mamluks overtake them.
أو كسرنا من حصار